Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the 13th Fleet After Action Report. I am Chris, your host. I am going to be talking some X-Wing tonight, but I do want to give you some programming notes before I get into the show here. First off, we normally have Thursday Night Armada. We will not be having that this week. I apologize. That's going to make 2 weeks straight that we haven't had it. But this is Adepticon, so most of the players of the campaign are going to be out of town, and we will not be able to do our campaign battles. So we're going to be holding that off for a week. I apologize for that, but we will, on Monday's show, be talking Armada and some of the experiences that they had at the World Championships. So I hope you're looking forward to that. You will get your Armada fix soon, just not as soon as I would like. On top of that, we will have Tuesday Night X-Wing tomorrow night. But for tonight, we are going to be talking X-Wing, and I have my guest here, Dexter Ollis. Thank you for being on the show. Hopefully, we will have Ethan Emick joining us a little bit later. Unfortunately, Chris Emick had to cancel at the last minute. He's got some work issues that he's not been able to get on. But again, thanks for being on tonight, Dexter.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So we are going to talk tonight about TIE Defenders. If you've been watching Tuesday Night X-Wing last couple of weeks, you will know that I have been messing around with the double Defender build. And the reason why I've been doing that is actually because my TIE bombers have been in the process of getting painted. But I discovered after the first time that I ran double Defenders, I like the feel of it. I think there is potential in that build. Now, it's going to take some work. It's going to take some tweaking. But I wanted to get some other thoughts on that, and I hope some of you watching will share your thoughts. But let's go ahead and start off. Dexter, what do you think are the pros and cons of a double Defender build?
I think similar to a lot of kind of AC lists, it's a very low floor and a very high ceiling. If flown perfectly, it can be hard to really hit and kill a defender. And chance you might get half, especially on the new defenders that kind of take their own shields away. But generally speaking, those defenders, when flown by a perfect pilot, can be really hard to pin down and get enough arcs on to truly kill. But at the same time, if you make a mistake, if you stress them out too early and put them in a bad spot, 4 or 5 well modded shots will take it down, and that's a significant amount of points, as opposed to a decimator for 7 where 4 or 5 shots won't be enough to take it down.
I was going to say that is a really, really good comparison is, because of the point value on the Defender, comparing them to Decimators. And my thought process on the comparison between the two is that there's a lot more luck involved with a Defender, but they can be every bit, if not more, survivable than the Decimators simply because of the evasion factor.
Absolutely, they can be. With Lady Luck on your side, more dice is better. But especially in the more competitive circles, it's harder to pick a list where you're relying on luck. I think for those defenders, you really want to rely on the free evade if you're running one of the customizable defenders, and if you're running one of these new standard loadout defenders, probably taking that evade, you already get the free lock action. So unless you're not getting shot, you're gonna want to take that evade most likely. And then taking a little bit of the luck out of it, since they are just worth so much. And similar to a TIE fighter, right? The 2 point
Yeah.
ties are so great until you blank out and then you get one shot on turn 2 of the game or turn 1 of the game, and it's just over.
And I guess another thing to consider when you're looking at the Defenders is wow, my brain has completely shut off and I lost what I was getting ready to say. Oh man. I mean, offensively they are a bit more beefy, I think, than a decimator, and I think they're easier to fly. That piece, it's easier to get around obstacles, but just because of the size of them.
I think as far as avoiding obstacles, it is easier. Um, I just think there's less room for error. If you make a mistake with the decimator, you're probably going to be fine. If the only make mistake you make all game is messing up with a decimator and putting it somewhere you don't want, and again in a competitive circle, sure that might lose you the game, but especially in casual play, like if that's the only mistake you make, you're going to be fine. If for some reason you end up with your defender where it's getting shot a couple times, especially well modded shots, or if you end up with your defender in a spot where, you do somehow hit a rock with the defender instead, or it gets stressed out or ionized, it's not going to live through a mistake. So
Yeah.
you're a lot more liable to give those points up.
Well, I think I want to start the conversation with if you were working on a double defender build like I am, I feel like the place to start, and I brought it up on the screen right now, is with Captain Yor. I think Captain Yor at 6 points is really, really good. Not only is it a tie defender with all the things that go with defenders at 6 points, but he also has the capability to double tap, which, while it's the second shot is going to be an ion cannon shot, that still can be useful and it can still do at least a little bit of damage.
Absolutely. I think, if your goal is to run two defenders, you do want the 6 point defender. Taking another one for 7 points, most of them I don't think are worth the extra point over your. Um, Maybe Colonel Jendon and I guess it depends on your flavoring, but I think your at 6 is a better price. I'd rather have the extra point elsewhere than go up in initiative in most of the cases, or two for Jendon.
Yeah, it,
And the ability to double tap, and that if you can fly it well, it has a very high offensive output with the ability to double tap with that ion cannon and with the free lock.
yeah, I was getting ready to touch on that. That free lock is something that I think is a big deal as well. I mean, well, of course, any action that you get for free is a good action.
Absolutely.
And so if you're starting off with Captain Yor, what do you think goes best with Captain Yor? If you're looking for a second defender, I think we can rule out Vader just because Vader is so expensive.
Yeah, Vader's a lot of fun to fly, but he's just a little bit too much, and his ability is really good. The ability to just spend that force to change a blank into a hit, but the inability to spend the force on defense, just nine points, and you can't even spend the force on defense, is a hard bargain. That's perfect flight required, even for initiative 6, which is hard.
So, who do you think pairs well with Yor?
It's hard to say exactly just because I haven't flown Defenders a whole lot. I have flown one before a few times, but I don't claim to be super skilled at all. I like Colonel Jendon just because he is at initiative 6, which makes it a little bit easier to, avoid being shot. You get the ability to potentially initiative kill if it's something that you can line up a couple good shots on, or if you can't initiative kill, then at the very least you can kind of dodge arcs. But Jindin, similarly to your, lacks some of the defensive capabilities, the free evade. Um, not only does he not get a free evade, so he needs to decide every turn, am I going to spend my action on an evade? But on top of that, his goal is to spend his shields. Once you're unshielded, the blank into a focus is nice, but is that enough to save the fact that you've already given him, half of your HP between being shot and taking your own shields on those range bonus attacks? Hard to say, especially depending on what they're running. I did see for the official rulings for Worlds, they talked about how Click interacts with the Chiss engineering. So, if the player order gives Click or the Republic player initiative first during the attack, then they can actually just click, and then Jendon or Yor can't trigger Chiss engineering to apply the shield bonus. Whereas if the Empire player gets initiative first, they rolled road for the turn and won. They can actually spend their shield to apply the range bonus, and then click can remove the range bonus post. So you spent a shield for effectively no result.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, that's
so
kind of
something to watch
ugly.
out for. Yeah, if you're playing Yor or Jendon, something to watch out for that you can end up, either getting shut down. You'd rather have Click have the initiative in that situation, just because then he's letting you know not to spend the shield as opposed to spending it and losing out on the bonus.
Yeah.
Um, if it
No,
wasn't genned in,
go ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I would say probably Rexler if it wasn't genned in. Because Rexler, he's still initiative 5, so he's got some of the ability to dodge. He gets the full throttle, so he has the extra defensive mods. In addition to his pilot ability, as well as the way that people usually build him, he's built just to increase his evades. Uh, After you perform an attack that hits, if you were evading, expose one of the defender's damage cards. So he gets a little bit extra punch for taking the evade he's getting for free every turn. With Rexler, you can put that action into a reposition or into a focus every turn. Maybe a target lock, but most of the time I think you'd either focus for extra defense or reposition, and then you take juke on him, and all of a sudden with juke and you know
And
it's a lot of punch.
I was running Rexler last week and definitely had juke on him and felt that that was a good use. Now I was also using thread tracers, which was a bad use. I don't know what this fixation is that I have with thread tracers. I really, really like thread tracers, but I recognize that is not the optimal choice.
Yeah, I think usually you see people run him with, I think a lot of times like barrage rockets, because that way if you do take the focus, then at range 3 you don't lose anything, and you can get the extra, re-rolls on your attack if you get the bullseye lineup. Other than that, maybe HLC for somebody that likes the bullseye lineups. Maybe passive, but passive's not usually necessary. If you're fighting in initiative 6, you generally, I don't think, want Rexler in the vicinity just because he's doesn't want to get shot by them over and over.
Yeah. Now, I do want to kind of jump over to something that I think is probably not a good choice, but I want to have somebody follow up on my thought process here, and that is Countess Riot. Countess Riot is interesting in that Initiative 4 is not horrible, but the ability to turn all of the straights into K turns, and when you look at the dial on the TIE Defender, all of those K turns are going to be white. So you're not stressing yourself to do those. It does add some interesting maneuver options, but is it worth it for not being able to do a lot of other things?
Yeah, I think it's definitely fun to play around with. In my opinion, I would say no, just because you already get the white 4K. There are positions certainly where I'd rather have a 5K or a 2K be white. But I think the 4K is far enough that usually I'd be okay with settling for the 4K and taking the hit to be, Colonel Jendon or Rexler instead, just so that I can have a little bit more punch. Whereas Ryad for 7 points, the difference between getting an extra, crit instead of a hit,
Yeah,
or, the initiative 6 as opposed to initiative 4, just so that I can do the 2K and the 5K, and I guess the 3K, but I don't think that's so close to a 4K. You usually want to go either really far or a little bit shorter, in my opinion. Um, and it's just not as applicable. Like not worth the difference, the opportunity cost of extra punch or extra survivability.
yeah. I tend to agree. I think that is about where I was at. Now, I think Riot has a pretty decent loadout number. I think maybe 13. I'm not 100% certain on that. I know a couple of them have a 13-point loadout. But then we also have Volscaris, who is another Initiative 5 defender. The interesting thing that I find about Volscaris is because of the way his action is set up, you are going to be able to have a little bit more flexibility on who you choose to lock because of the timing of things.
Absolutely. I think Volt, um, it's hard just because the strain hurts so much in a ship already that, you don't want to lose health on since it's so expensive. And those 3 green dice, if they should, you know, you get average or below average luck, you can get hit pretty hard if you're not effectively dodging a whole lot of their arcs. With the evade, sure, you could take maybe a shot a turn and hope to luck out, but with a strain, then you're rolling 2 dice and hoping for 2 evades out of them. You get 1 for free each turn. Um, it does add, especially if you're not in a ship's arc, or if you hit, a really nice 4K and you're able to set up where, okay, they'll have a 2 die gun that's not going to be locked or modded. It can be really effective. It's just a really hard decision, I think, to give yourself, do I take the strain to save my action? And most of the time that'd be applicable is against initiative sixes, maybe if you lose road in a really important turn against initiative fives. Um, but I don't know. It's hard to say that that's a better pilot ability, say, than Rexler or Jendon for the extra initiative already. So
Yeah,
you can
now I
pick your
always I
locks.
always get confused, and I'm sure there are some other viewers that get confused as well. Difference between strain and stress. Stress, you can't do actions. Strain, you lose one defense. Correct?
Right, and the stress you can only lose by, either an ability trigger or doing a blue maneuver. Strain you can lose by a blue, or the first time that you do get shot and you have one less strain, you'll lose it then as well. So it's not a full turn debuff. If you the first time you get shot, you lose it.
Yeah.
But even just that one time with one less die, if you're shooting, say, somehow you end up, God forbid, range one of a decimator and they're rolling 4, all of a sudden that one extra die makes all the difference in not taking 2 or 3 hits.
Well, I feel like this is more useful at like the very start of the encounter, where your first maneuver, you go ahead and you take the strain to get the energy, get the charge, and then you go ahead after that and do a blue maneuver. But I don't know, that also makes you predictable, and being predictable is not good.
Absolutely. I don't, like I said, I'm not super experienced with a defender, and I wouldn't claim to be able to fly one of these competitively in any sense. But some of the guys that I played with locally, one of the guys out of Louisville, Gordon, said like the biggest thing, because he flew a defender and he doesn't come to be good with it, but he's certainly much better than I am, is, in the games he flew it, it was not stressed until he knew, well, this is last turn, either by timer or by points.
Yeah.
So he was not predictable at all. There was no telling. I mean, the dial is very open. Other than maybe turning being a little bit hard,
Yeah.
you can go where you want with the defender. So being stressed or strained and not wanting to land in front of somebody strained, being predictable in a ship that can't get shot is a really bad thing, in my opinion.
So next, let's look at Captain Dobbs, which is a 3 initiative, and I could see a defensive build with Dobbs, but I can't say that I actually love it. I feel like you are putting him in danger to save something that is probably less likely to survive the game anyway.
Right. Yeah, it's like we said, right? The worst thing to do is to become predictable. And the only way to become more predictable than to be stressed in a defender is to be ionized, because then instead of between a 1 bank and a 5 straight, you're stuck with a 1 bank or a 1 straight. So it's not
And then
anymore,
your
well, are
only
they going to go
action is
solar
also going
mass?
to be a
A
focus.
focus. Right. Yeah. So then you're even more predictable. You're only initiative 3. Um,
You don't get the
I
full
don't know. I
throttle
don't,
bonus. You know?
right. I don't see a whole lot of reasons Dobbs would ever really see the table, truthfully, for 7 points as well. Maybe if he was like super marked down to 5 points and he still had that 15 loadout,
Yeah.
the chassis is so nice that people would fly it. But I don't, for 7, honestly, even for 6, like that's the other thing, is for 6, you're competing with Vader. I think I don't know that a whole lot of people prefer Yor to Vader either. Because for 6, then it's, do I take this, similar to 7, you're competing with the Decimator and Rack. Do I
Yeah.
take this, or do I take like Action or Battle of Yavin Vader? And Dobbs for 7 for more than Vader is absolutely not worth more than a Decimator or than Vader at 6.
Yeah. So let's end up here talking about Colonel Vessery. And Colonel Vessery is something that I've just recently come around to, and thinking that this in this build, I like him. Now, he may not be right, and I'll have to play test it to see if he fits. But the idea of getting free locks after somebody else has gotten free locks feels like it's a good setup there.
Yeah, I think Vestry could be a lot of fun to play around with. I know, like you said, you love the thread tracers. He kind of gives those, to himself, not necessarily to other ships, but kind of plays around a little bit with that. And I think Vessery also, out of all of the TIE defenders, makes one of the best arguments to use the alternative configuration. So instead of that full throttle, taking the Defender Elite that allows you to decrease the difficulty of your sharps, increases your 4K to a red. So unfortunately, you lose the white 4K. But then after you perform a cannon or missile attack, if you have a lock on the defender, you may perform a bonus primary attack against the defender. So let's say Vessery in a list with any other 4, 5, or 6 that's shooting first. Um, he can take a focus or take an evade to increase his survivability. He fires something, potentially a cannon would be easy. If he wants a lock originally, then he could fire homing missiles or concussion or, any other missile. But let's say he takes like ion cannon or I don't know, tractor beam even just for fun, make him weaker. Then after he shoots, after he rolls dice, if it's locked by another ship, he could acquire a lock, and then he could use that lock on the cannon when he rolls dice again. As long as I'm not mistaken, he should be able to acquire a second lock if it was locked by another friendly ship, because he rolled dice, but the ship is still locked by a friendly ship. So he could hypothetically like modded tractor beam into a modded primary attack, and the ship would be tractor beamed for the primary attack, and he'd still have that lock. So I think there's a lot of fun to play around with it, especially because it says acquire a lock. So he's able to do that several times in a turn as opposed to taking a lock action. I think either playing around with like take his own lock or take a focus and then fire a cannon, either ion, tractor beam, heavy laser cannon and get him messed up, and then fire an additional primary attack. I think could be a lot of fun to play around with.
Yeah, I really hadn't thought about that aspect of it because I wasn't big on the alternate configuration because essentially, from my perspective, you're losing two things. One, you're losing that white 4K, and you're also forcing yourself to take that lock action in order to take advantage of the double shot. So at that point, you're losing the evade. But with Vessery going with you could potentially get that lock without even having to do that, and that could be a big difference. I hadn't looked at that configuration, so I'm going to have to dig a little bit deeper there now to see if it's worth it. Because having two double tap defenders is something to look at.
Absolutely. And I think, the TIE Defender Elite on almost all of the defenders is just a net loss. But, if you're especially in, just messing around and having a fun list, seeing what works and what doesn't, just for fun combos, I think Vessery and Yor could be a lot of fun. The tractor beam shot, and if you have whatever else, any other fours, threes, twos, a lot of people are running Vizier in the or Faroff, either one of those for 4 points. You could fit one of those in addition to those other ships. And then a bomber, say like Tomax or Reimer and Vizier, and all of a sudden, one of your, honestly, whichever ship, maybe not Vizier, one of your fours. So maybe you're shooting with Reimer, um, and he takes a lock first, or somebody else. I'm sorry, no, you don't even have to shoot with another ship. Just somebody takes a lock. So you could be running any list you want where somebody takes a lock, and then Vessery shoots first at 4. If you're having, a low initiative list, you
Yeah.
get the tractor beam off. That's modded, at least single modded tractor beam with a lock, potentially a focus if you took a focus, and then you take a modded primary attack. Hopefully they're tractored, so they're rolling one less defensive dice, and you can acquire a lock again. And then you follow up with your double tap, and then you follow up with whoever else. If you have Vizier shooting 3 or Faroff shooting 3, and then Reimer shooting 3 or whatever the case is. I think there'd be a lot of fun to mess around with a list like that where you're shooting a whole lot of dice at something tractored. Because normally you don't see that in anything except maybe CIS. You see that with some of the Nantexes, but CIS is so non-competitive right now that you don't actually see it on a board.
Yeah.
So I think that could be a lot of fun to play around with.
So that pretty much gives you all of the options on the combinations, and I think the two of us can agree that really, if you're doing it, you're doing and then you're doing either Vessery or Rexler. I think that pretty much are the most solid ways to go about it. Of course, there's Jendon as well that is the initiative 6, but I don't know. I'm still not sure he does enough to make it worthwhile, in my opinion. But then again, proton cannons can do some damage.
Yeah, hard to say. I think, with an excellent pilot, he could be just as worth 7 points as something else. That proton cannons, and you make it a range 1 proton cannon by spending a shield. So you could be range 3 shooting 5 dice with, a target lock. That could be pretty scary. Target lock and maybe a focus if you took one.
Yeah,
Um, blow a relatively big ship off the board with a proton cannon 5 die gun.
yeah,
Because I think that's the only configuration where you're going to see proton cannons able to get the range 1 bonus. Because it's range 2 to 3. So you could hypothetically just snipe something off the board turn 1 or turn 2. But yeah, and
but you have to
in
fly
the
it
terms
well.
of keeping your yeah, in the terms of keeping your floor as high as possible, Jendon is a little bit scarier than somebody else. It'll be a little bit easier to put together what flight path is going to be most effective.
So when we're talking about things that can go with this, do you go with a 4 or a 5 ship build? And me personally, I've been running a 5 ship build. I know a lot of people would kind of look at me sideways for doing the 2 point TIE fighters, but honestly, because the rest of the build draws so much attention, you can typically get away with having those 2 ties as objective runners, and sometimes just occasionally getting off a pot shot that does some wonderful things. And again, you don't have to do much to earn those 2 points back.
Absolutely. I've seen I use in my list a single 2 point TIE fighter. So I don't get two of them, but the amount of time, a 2 point TIE fighter is almost all just luck, right? Like
Yeah,
the flying you can do a lot of flying. Not to say that there's not a lot of skill involved in flying them effectively. But I've had my Black Squadron ace do a lot of cleanup that he should not have been able to pull off. But that can be the difference between an extra shot. Most of the time he'll be the last thing shooting in a round or the second to last thing shooting. So something that your opponent thought they were going to squeak by on 1 or 2 HP, and all of a sudden, you get crit hit or hit and they blank out. There goes your 4 or 5 point ship, and my Black Squadron ace just took care of business.
so then you're looking at, you can do those 2 ties, or you can do a Captain Jonas in there, which I think we're all really well familiar with Captain Jonas and the wonderful things that he does. And then that leaves 3 points left in the build, and generally you're going with another bomber because it's hard to argue against TIE bombers.
Yeah, I think for me personally, for 4 points, especially if I was running what's his name? Colonel Vestry with that interesting tractor beam build, I might be tempted to take Faroff and just play, I think 000 Faroff could be kind of mean.
I am not
Or
familiar with that one, so let me look that up real fast.
yeah, it's the tie Reaper. 4 points in this initiative 3. So the Reaper, if you're not familiar with it, is a medium base, 3 offensive dice, 1 agility, 6 hull, and 2 shields. And then before you reveal your dial, if you are not stressed, you may boost. So they make really good crate carriers because it's not a boost action, so they can have a crate or even be ionized and still boost. And then they have a white jam, which you don't see a whole lot of jam in Empire.
What was the character's name
So
again?
this one is Captain Faroff. People usually use him or Vizier. Faroff is a little bit more defensive. While you defend, if the attacker does not have any green tokens, you may change one of your blank or focus results to an evade result. So if you can get the green tokens off of whoever's shooting Faroff, he gets pretty much a guaranteed evade every time if they don't have a green token.
He's initiative
Um,
3.
yeah, initiative 3. So if some of your higher initiatives can blow off the green token, or I believe if the attacker spends the green token, I believe that if the attacker, let's say Major Rhymer shoots, spends his focus, Then when you're defending and you roll, they don't have a green token anymore, and then you get the free evade. As far as I'm aware, that's how it works. I could be mistaken. So at a tournament, you may want to double check with the judge, but I think a lot of the time he's getting that, unless it's a ship that has double greens or doesn't need the green mod when they roll, they just roll well. He'll get that free evade, so he can stay on the board a little bit longer than maybe he should most of the time because of his pilot ability. And then he can put out a whole lot of hurt, just because he's a 3 die gun, 4 dice if you get up close, and then people,
And he takes 8 hits. So
yeah, takes 8 hits, and you can put some interesting things on him. I thought you could put 000. I know you used to be able to. When I'm looking at Yasby, it's not showing me an option. Um, oh, or squad including Darth Vader. So that's what it is. A lot of people run the Decimator
yeah,
Rat with
with
Farop, and
Vader.
then you have the opportunity to run 000. So in this list, he couldn't run that. But if you wanted to run uh, Agent Callus, maybe it could be kind of fun. Just to have the opportunity to get an extra offensive mod as well, on a ship, or I don't know, anything for 5 points. There's a couple things that would be a lot of fun to run. Tactical Scrambler in a list like this could be pretty good for 2, and then for 3 you could do Lone Wolf or Predator and just shove him up the gut by himself. Um, as well as I think he can take,
It looks like he's
yeah,
got a
Tactical
jam.
Scrambler would be fine. Yeah, and the Reapers have jams, so that helps both with his ability and in general. Fighting a Reaper is pretty scary as a Decimator player because if that Reaper gets in there and is able to jam me successfully, especially they'll need to do it kind of 2 turns in a row because I take that first turn target lock. But you can remove the reinforce on some ships that really want their reinforce, or remove a target lock from a ship that needs it to fire ordnance, like say Reimer or any of the other ships, or you're fighting a defender and God forbid they let your Reaper get a range 1 shot or a range 2 bullseye, and they get that jam off. You lose your evade or your lock, which is what you're, the whole build for these new standard loadout ones. And then you're taking a pretty serious shot from Faroff. So he can be a little bit of a menace. Vizier is the other one. He plays more of a support role. He's initiative 2, and if you use the pre-dial boost, you can perform a white coordinate and then skip your perform action step. So people will use him to set up some extra double mods that he, because he gets the boost right off the bat.
Yeah.
And then he can coordinate. He'll be close to ships that say you 1 straight boost with him, and then 1 straight again, and you're 5 straighting with another ship. He can still get the boost off even though they're a different initiative and won't line up right next to him. Um, as well as he has just enough loadout value to take Emperor Palpatine, which is a 1 force regenerating while another friendly ship defends or performs an attack. You may spend 1 force to modify one of its dice as though that ship had spent 1 force. So basically, every turn you get a force to spend as you wish on any of your ships, including Vizier. But most of the time, he can kind of play a salvage crate objective role,
Right.
and take a few pot shots, and then your Vessery or your Jendon, whoever else you're using, gets an extra force for offense or defense to kind of keep them on the board and being effective.
Well, I shared with you the list that I am looking at, and I feel like now is a good time to talk about it once I find it. There we go. It's called up in the screen there. And with this list again, I am going with the double ties for objective runners, and more or less feel like a lot of people are going to ignore them. But I mean, then again, they are cheap points as well. So you've got to fly it right and recognize what your opponent is doing to make those work the way that you want them to work. But I also am running Major Rhymer. I tried, because of the higher initiative, I did try Tomax Ren, but I don't know. There's just something about him that didn't fit quite the way that I wanted it to. I think the range bonus with Reimer is going to be more significant.
Yeah, and did you use Tomax with the? Did you use customizable Tomax or standard loadout
I
Tomax?
used customizable Tomax.
Okay, I think absolutely. If you're using the customizable versions, Reimer with the clusters has a little bit more kick. The one initiative, it sucks to lose it, but getting the cluster missiles and the sat salvo at any range is kind of nice. Um, But I think if you haven't looked at it a whole lot, you might consider looking at the customizable or the standard loadout Tomax, just because he can be kind of scary at a high initiative and the double modded. If you haven't seen him, basically his pilot ability allows him to take a barrel roll into a focus into a red target lock, and he's got plasma torpedoes. And then at the end of the activation phase, he can turn his stress into a strain. And you do that once every 2 turns. It's got 2 charges that need to regenerate.
Yeah.
But your first engagement turn, you're able to barrel roll, focus, target lock, fire off. In most lists, your first shot or your second shot if you
Now
have Vader or something like that.
is he 3 or 4 points?
He's 3 as well, so in the
Okay.
same boat as Rammer. And so you can fire off those double modded plasma torps, take off a shield as well as 1 or 2 hits most of the time. Not even pay the price for it. You just strain, might get shot and lose it. You might, keep it for a few turns, but you don't need the blue to get rid of it. It's just a strain. Um, and then you can actually, one thing that I thought was kind of cool. I haven't really done it because it's really niche. But you could hypothetically, if you keep the lock, take the reload. If you haven't reloaded before, you're not familiar. You actually, when you reload, you get to regain 1 charge on either a missile or a bomb or a torpedo, I think. And then you take a disarm and a stress. But on this, because of the true grit, you take a disarm and a stress. Sorry, you could true grit off the disarm into a strain token, and he could reload and fire his plasma torpedoes in the same turn. So hypothetically, if you're chasing a target late game or you get that opening engagement, you have a nice turn 3 and you think you can hit the blue turn 4 and it's not that bad. I just think it would be really fun to reload into a shot because most ships can't do that. I know one of the new Rebel A-wings I think has the ability to do that with APTs maybe, I want to say. But just the idea of reloading into firing is so much fun to me. I don't know why.
No,
But
no, I
yeah,
like that. Yes. I definitely like that idea. And I think I may do some research here, and I may have this list changed up before I play it tomorrow. So we'll see. It does sound definitely interesting, and I feel like it can be competitive. But again, I definitely agree with you that it's going to be something that you have to practice at, and you're going to have to fly them really well.
absolutely, yeah. And knowing I mean that's any list, right? Knowing your list will get you much further than having a good list a lot of the time. Being a good pilot and knowing how to fly your list and how to compete with an opponent depending on what their list is just as important as having a good list. But it's especially important in this one, I think. The ceiling and floor are much more extreme than say like triple arcs where, you're very competitive because the list just has so much health and damage, you're not going to be able to take out the whole thing.
All right. Well, I know this has been kind of a short show today, but we haven't really we've pretty much covered the topic, I think. And now it's just a matter of seeing if tweaks can make things look better. So for the next few weeks, you may see me on the stream a lot just because I wanted to develop this idea and see what you guys think of the idea. So don't hesitate to share messages with us. You can find us on Discord. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Facebook. So go on any of those. Let us know what you think as we continue to develop this idea. And if you don't mind, tomorrow night, if you want to beat down on me and see how things go.
Sure, yeah, I can. Or were you talking to me?
Yes.
Coming on the game? Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I can. I'll bring my list. I'll be bringing the same one I've been practicing with. And if you want to bring your double defenders, I should be there so we can play on stream tomorrow. We might even get to start our game a little bit early since I think you and I are usually some of the first ones there.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I am going to say goodnight to you. I want to thank you for being on the show, Dexter. And hopefully, in a couple of weeks, when we're back to talking X Wing, you can let us know about how great things went for you at Adepticon.
We'll see about great. I appreciate you having me on. Let's see you.
No worries. Good luck at Adepticon.
Thank you.
All right. So, like I said, that's about all we've got for tonight. It's a bit of a short show tonight, but hopefully it gave you some information and some things to think about as far as TIE defenders are concerned in X-Wing. I think they are a very, very skill based ship, based on how many points that you're going to be putting into them. But I think if you synergize correctly, you're going to have a really solid build, and you'll probably have a lot of fun flying it. As for what we've got going on this week, again, we will be having Tuesday night X-Wing tomorrow night. We will not be having Thursday night Armada this week. Most of the players are at Adepticon, and I am going to be a bit tied up, to be perfectly honest, so I won't be doing anything for that. On top of that, then we will have next Monday, we'll have the Armada crew on talking about their experience at World Championships at Adepticon. I will not be attending Adepticon, so you won't get any updates or anything like that. But I do recommend that you check out Ion Radio. Ion Radio will have some great coverage of the event. Definitely worth taking the time to watch that and see what's going on at the World Championships. So with that, I'm going to say good night. I hope you guys enjoy the show, and I hope you have a wonderful week.